I would show some updates related to integrating UI testing into Orchard core. This is not the first time we are talking about this, and I started this a very long time ago, but now it's taking shape. So I would like to have some feedback. I would like to ask for some feedback, and also whether I should actually finish it up. So we are talking about this pull request and UI testing with Selenium and in .NET and with our library called the Lombiq UI Testing Toolbox. There's already UI testing under the name functional testing in Orchard with Cypress. This is a bit different. This is not using these tests are not run or not written in JavaScript, but in .NET. They use different underlying libraries for browser automation, and what's being tested here is a little bit different as well. I implemented everything that was in Cypress before, and there's a lot more now. So you can check out the progress here as well. And here's what I have done until now. There's a new folder called orchardcore.test.ui and also a test.ui.mvc. The MVC one is just testing an MVC launch. There's no CMS functionality or anything like that. And the test.ui tests the whole of the Orchard feature set, or rather it launches the full CMS application. And we have a couple of tests here. The main goal was to have some decent coverage. So we are not waiting for an hour for all the UI tests to finish, but still we can be fairly confident that if these pass, then we haven't messed up anything too badly. Namely, we have some tests for all the recipes, all the built-in recipes. So you see agency, blank blog, coming soon, headless, and also SaaS. Under the SaaS recipe tests, we also have a test not just for the SaaS recipe itself, but also in this other test, we create a new tenant from that default tenant that was set up with the SaaS recipe, and we test that one. When I'm saying it's testing something, it's actually clicking through a lot of stuff. The most complete one is actually here. I think, yeah, this is the most complete one under block recipe tests. This one runs the whole setup and checks out a lot of things there, as well as something what we called basic features. This is coming for now, but probably this is coming for now from the UI testing toolbox, but it's probably something that should rather be moved into Orchard. And if you check it out, you will see that it tests basically all the most important features. Login, logout, registration, basic content operations, and obviously it starts with the setup, as I mentioned, turns features on and off, so to make sure that nothing is really badly broken. It also has some negative and positive tests. So as you have seen, first the registration is tested with invalid data and then with valid data, then the login and everything else. The tests also implicitly check a lot of logs. So while this is clicking through here, the browser logs are checked, so there are no JavaScript errors. The server-side logs, the Orchard logs, are checked that there are no exceptions happening on the server side. There's a check which is enabled for HTML validation, so that we haven't messed up the HTML standard. And there's also something that's currently turned off, except for the front end, which is accessibility checks. So to make sure that Orchard is following at least those parts of the accessibility guidelines that are possible to check automatically. By accessibility, I mean to make the website accessible to, for example, the visually impaired people. Apart from these basic tests, there are also two a bit more special tests. First, there is this as Azure Blob Storage tests. This is testing the same features, but it does it by using Azure Blob Storage for media storage. This is configured here. So apart from this enabling the Azure Media Storage feature, this also starts an Azure Blob Storage emulator called Azure It behind the scenes. Well, I mean, this is started in the build workflow when it's executed on GitHub. And finally, there's also a so-called monkey test for the admin area. I've demonstrated this before when I first implemented it, but this is now testing Orchard as well. Monkey tests are about random interactions. So this goes to the admin and then clicks, pans, scrolls, does everything randomly. The point here is not to have a substitute for manual tests, but rather to try to break the application in very stupid ways. This is a good way to uncover some validation issues or JavaScript errors, or sometimes even lack of validation on the server side, just by wreaking havoc on the application. And this is useful for the front end as well, but we are doing it for the admin here because, well, that's where we have the most way to interact with the application. So yeah, this goes on for a while. It's configurable how long it takes. By default, it's just running with the defaults, except that it only spends 10 seconds on a single page. So that's what I've implemented. There are a couple of things remaining here, but I didn't want to progress before asking for feedback here. For now, everything pretty much runs on a push. So I've also changed the corresponding GitHub Actions workflow. This is not finished yet, so that's why you see things commented out that I didn't want to run right now. But this has code for running these tests in every environment configuration, so under Windows and under Linux. Formerly, the Cypress tests only run under Linux. It runs it launches, as I mentioned, an Azure Blob Storage emulator, and then it tests the CMS application with every database. So with SQLite, with Postgre, SQL Server, and also with MySQL, or rather the open source version of it called MariaDB. So it's remaining that this execution during CI is a bit less wasteful. So not everything is running every time. Documentation, some cleanup is necessary, and also possibly moving the magic that happens when you run this test basic Orchard features, because this is currently coming from the UI testing toolbox. So probably this code should rather be in Orchard. So if anything changes on the admin, the tests will be possible to fix directly in the Orchard source. So basically that's it. This is not finished yet, but the first question is, do you think it's a good idea to finish it and to have this instead of Cypress tests?
Everyone's so quiet, I will have to talk.
Easy.
Is it better than Cypress? You tell us, so we'll trust you. Is it better with a Playwright? Everyone's moving out of Selenium and going to Playwright now, so I'm confused.
Yeah, I don't know. So the UI testing toolbox uses Selenium. just because. So there was no larger strategic decision behind that a couple of years ago when we started it, rather than Selenium was well established by the time, Playwright less so. Yeah, it's a different underlying browser automation, but I'm not sure how much it matters. So when you are writing the tests, it's not much.
They say.
I don't know, because we haven't tested Playwright, but it seems that most of the performance is taken in the application. So it's less about the preferences of the browser automation, but rather what happens once you click something in the browser.
Maybe, but not really fast. I don't know. There was a difference when we moved to Cypress, so we have numbers. So yeah, a rated question. How long does it take now?
It depends. I didn't do repeated measurements. So these are just a specific point in time. As you can see, I've run some examples of all the DB engines. As mentioned, you wouldn't run all of these all the time. Which one does? With Postgre, apparently under Ubuntu.
Oh, it's much slower, and it's just one of them. Wow.
Yeah, the tests are something like 6 minutes under Ubuntu. I think it's a bit more under Windows.
Because the full build, well, you were complaining when the full build was taking 8 minutes, and now it's taking 17 minutes for one database.
It shouldn't be 17.
It's written in the top. It's 6+. Yeah.
Oh, it's 15.
Because
yeah, but the build was very slow this time. Yeah, so the testing itself is something like 6 minutes.
In your changes also, we are testing on everything, and I don't think we are currently testing on everything. That's why we have a step to test on everything. We have a specific workflow to say test all databases, because we don't want to do that on every PR. We just want to test on SQLite, because we don't want to test the database itself or the code for the database. We assume that we would just check for SQLite for failures, and then sometimes we do a full functional test on all the databases. Are you still keeping that?
Yeah, I would make that sometimes also a bit formal. So that's a question. Obviously, we shouldn't run all of these all the time for every push. But I would run this test suite, what we are looking at exactly, the SQLite ones, at least under Ubuntu, probably also under Windows, for pull requests. And once something is merged into main, then run everything else as well. Because then, while the feedback loop is longer, and probably you have to, yeah, but it's still automatic, and nobody has to wait for that when something is pushed to main.
Mm-hmm.
For the pull request, yes.
Okay.
Also, it's a question whether we want to run all of these tests under a pull request, even for SQLite. So I think this is a pretty complete test suite for general smoke testing. It is a lot more than what we had before with Cypress. The question is, do we want to have everything here, like all the recipes, monkey testing and stuff?
You mentioned that it should not be much lower than Cypress because it's just, or Playwright because it's just the time of framework versus Orchard. But I see a big difference here is that every test is really binary, and then seems to reset up everything, because I see a single test like taking a minute from your window. Might I see on your screen? And I'm pretty sure that in Cypress we were using some previous state, like it was more like a flow of test for a single deployment sometimes, just to optimize the speed of the test. Like we don't need to reset up a full tenant just to click on the link. No?
Yeah. And that's a good point, and that's what we actually use in our own tests. I don't think that was the case with Cypress test, by the way. The reason why this is not happening here, what the UI Testing Toolbox can do is that it can take a snapshot after setup. So if you if you run multiple tests, for example, on an application that was set up with the blog recipe, then you just run the setup once and take a snapshot. Well, a snapshot will be automatically taken, and then everything else runs from that. So it's a bit faster. Why this is not happening here is because of two reasons. First of all, there aren't really many tests that use the same recipe. Pretty much all of these are different recipes, needing different setups. There are, I think, like 2 exceptions using the same recipes. And the more important part is that we only have this snapshot support for SQLite and SQL Server, not for Postgre, MySQL. I could do it in a way that that snapshotting is used for only SQLite and SQL Server, and the rest are thus slower, but we don't care that much because that's only run on main pushes. For now, this is not the case.
Yeah, so recipe test should be full, like, okay, set up the recipe and ensure that the recipe worked. That's a recipe test. But then a feature test should just pick up maybe one database and set up one thing and check the feature itself, even if another feature has been tested on the same setup.
Yeah, so for example, what these tests do, what wasn't the case with Cypress, is that formerly under the Cypress tests, the setup was run and then one check was made on the home page that the setup actually succeeded. As mentioned, this test, for example, runs a whole suite of other feature tests for all the basic orchard features. Now, this is fully run for the blog with the blog recipe, but while not fully the same thing, but something similar happens for the agency recipe as well, as you can see here, and something for the coming soon headless and all the other recipes. Maybe that's not something probably that we want to do for every pull request either. I think we definitely want to do this again on main pushes, because these recipes can be broken in different ways, but perhaps not all the time. How does that sound?
Anyone else wants to say something? Anyone who writes unit tests? Functional tests? Okay. So meeting is recorded. We'll wait for some feedback. PR on the issues.
All right, let's see. That's was it then. Thank you.
Thank you.